Hello, Mr. Roberts. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I know that you're a very busy man, so I'll just get straight to the point. You probably heard about some kind of a backlash from the Afro Latino community regarding a movie In the Heights by the great Lin Manuel Miranda. Even though it made national news, the shock was intense for an overwhelming amount of people, not just on the American side, but also the Latino community who just didn't quite understand what the whole thing was about. Even a personality from HBO said on his show, and I'm just paraphrasing here, I don't get it. It's a movie about Latinos, made by Latinos, in a Latino neighborhood full of Latinos in it. I don't get it. What if I were to tell you, Mr. Roberts, that the backlash is, in my opinion, directly linked to one of the companies, one of the TV network under your vast empire? Shocking. You have no idea. Look, Mr. Miranda himself had no idea the intensity, the level of racism that occurs within the Latino community itself. How would he? He's a wonderful human being, clearly, but and given the ESG score that Comcast has, clearly indicates your commitment to diversity, which is the reason why I believe you are really going to enjoy this story. Now, Mr. Roberts, before I start the story, I want to show you something. It's the website for Telemundo showing the current list of talent, I guess, on their national programming. Let's see if you are able to catch something missing from that list. It's what I call silent racism. My name is irrelevant, really. Just think of me as one of millions of Afro Latinos, not only in North America, but also all throughout the Caribbean, in Central and South America, all the way down to Argentina. All right, okay? So let's start the story. Hundreds of years ago, during the African slave trading days, as the ships arrived on the new continent, well, new to them, with their human cargo, they would actually find certain strategic locations, such as Cuba, which served sort of like a warehouse would today for goods. Except back then, clearly, it was the chain merchandise. Which, by the way, slavery was the common thing for human beings to do to one another. If you lost a war, all of a sudden the losing side of the house would become slaves. Even, raids on different tribes. And this occurred all over the planet. So, even Africa, of course. So, a lot of those Africans that were actually shipped to the American continent were initially caught by African themselves, which is just horrific. So Cuba was perfectly located in terms of being in the center of everything. As Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. Found out when he was doing a documentary called Black in Latin America, there were vast cells and ruins at this time, of course, but they were huge, in which clearly hundreds and hundreds of slaves were kept. Now, as the orders came in from the United States, the Caribbean, Central and South America, they would simply be shipped. So as the story goes, as the saying, we all came in the same ship. We just got distributed differently. As it always has occurred in history, that human quest for freedom sparked the first successful slave revolt in on Christmas Day, 1512, on an island next to Cuba, which is it was called the La Española, which is now that small island divided between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So word spread to the colonizers in the other parts of the continent about this revolt. And other revolts occur in different islands and so forth. So the colonizers found a new way on how to keep a hold, a grip on power by bringing a very old and very successful tactic of divide and conquer. So came in colorism, or in the United States, as it was known as the brown bag plan, in which if you take a brown bag, those brown and black slaves or semi-slave at that point, if you were if you were the color of a brown bag or lighter, then your life was going to be automatically easier. Your job would be in the house, softer jobs, and so forth. And if you were darker than the brown bag, life was going to be very hard for you. Life was going to be horrific. You were bound to do the hard work, the hard labor outside, and so forth. By the time I was born in that same island, by wonderful coincidence, a lot of families, not only there but all throughout Latin America, had actually become mixed families. But so has also carried on this strategy of colorism, divide and conquer, were clearly in place. Because by the time I was around 5 or 6 years old, I remember very clearly all these different sayings were coming into my brain. You know, at that point in life when a child is becoming conscious of his or her existence, which is the time when they start asking all this question, why this, why that, is because the brain is absorbing, it's brand new and it wants a lot of information, kind of like a computer. And all these bad codes were coming into my mind, such as, big lips, uh, bad hair instead of, hard hair. No, no, no. It's just your hair is bad versus good hair, uh, which the light skin in my family had. And the television, which is an incredibly powerful medium of communication and sort of describing what society is at any given point in time. The televisions locally created would have people like me, but they were basically musicians or comedians. And part of the comedy sketch would always, the black guy would always be the thief running, or they would actually call him a monkey and everybody would laugh. It's just horrific now that I think about it. But even back then, it somehow didn't seem right to me. So it was very passionate and in hard hitting acting novellas were coming out of places like Mexico. And they had some great shows for kids. But the one thing they all had in common was in a complete absence of black on their cast. Zero blacks. Almost like blacks not allowed to be on camera. At that time, I thought there aren't too many of us. Maybe that's why there's no blacks as the star of any show. By the time I was around 11 or 12 years old, I was really concerned about the way I was going to live my life. And because I trusted my writing by then, I had made some people cry with it. I remember I sat down opened up my notepad, and what came out was life is a collection of stages that we all need to surpass. And by the end of it all, I hope to regret very little in my past. I remember looking at it, I didn't understand what I had written. So I had to read it several times. And then eventually it made sense. So, as a kid that I was, I divided my life in certain stages. And then closed my notepad, went outside, and kept on playing. But that piece of writing has actually guided the rest of my life. By the time I turned 16, I found myself living in the island of Manhattan on 19th Street and 7th Avenue. The walls and ceiling of the apartment were white. Most cars that I saw were white. And the people around me were really, really white. The height, the physical appearance, the color in their eyes. And here I was, this kid who looked completely the opposite of just about anybody around me. And all these bad codes from my childhood, plus some additional trauma that had been added on. I was in trouble. I remember on a Sunday sitting down on the fire escape, just looking down and thinking, what does a person need in order to be happy? Does a person have to be white, handsome, rich, American? I mean, everything that I wasn't, because clearly I was not a happy person. And about 3 or 4 days later, I remember it was within that week, some breaking news came in that the first son of Gloria Vanderbilt, had actually committed suicide. And that was kind of a shock for me. I remember the next day I bought my first American newspaper. I didn't really know the language that well, but I wanted to see what this person looked like. And as soon as I grabbed it, I looked it up, and there he was. Everything I thought at that time would make someone happy. Yet this young man was in so much pain and so much confusion that for him the only way out was through the exit window of his mother's apartment, Avenue of all places. Really, really sad. And as horrific as that moment was for the family, I would like to say to Mr. Anderson Cooper that his brother's death very easily saved my life. There was only one Spanish television station at that time, which was Univision, and no blacks anywhere on their programming. And I thought, maybe we had not been here long enough, which I was mistaken. Afro Latino have been here for a long time, which is the case for Mr. Esteban Hostes, who came into the country as a young kid. And when World War II broke out, he actually enlisted and earned both his commission as a second lieutenant as well as his wing um, by becoming one of the Tuskegee Airmen. Someone else that you might actually know, Mr. Roberts, was a great baseball player, Roberto Clemente. Yes, from Pittsburgh. He was a great player. The stats indicate so. But what turned him into a hero was that after an earthquake on Nicaragua, he actually collected a lot of items and food and clothing for those victims. And the first plane that was sent, all the merchandise was lost. The second plane, everything was lost as well. And he found out that it had been the governmental officials who had actually taken all the goods that were sent. So he got on the third plane to make sure that personally he would deliver the merchandise to those who needed it. Sad to say, as we all know, there was a crash of the airplane and he perished. Oh, before I forget, someone else. Remember Starsky and Hutch? The original TV series, Huggy Bear. What's his name? Antonio Vargas. Yes, Afro-Latino. So we had been here for a long time. It's just that the network in Spanish, with that silent racism, it was more like black Latino, just stay on the back of the bus and don't say anything. Of course, I would watch Univision. That's the only thing we had until 1984 when Telemundo came into the picture. And the same thing. Blacks just stay on the back of the bus. But I would watch it. A lot of games, as you know, Afro Latino and sports. We've been there for a long time. Pelé, the to this day, the greatest soccer player ever, to a Mexican, Afro Latino. Yes, Mexican. They're there. And they celebrate their African ancestry. Um, when it comes to baseball, too many to mention. I mean, El Duque, Pedro Martinez, Big Papi, Bernie Williams, just too many. I cannot forget the closer. This man to me was the Michael Jordan of baseball. Whenever the Yankees were in a very tight situation, they knew they could call on one man, Mariano Rivera, and he would get the job done. Not only because he was such a wonderful player, but also as a human being, he carries the honor of being the only baseball player to have been inducted unanimously into the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame, of course. As life kept moving on, I encountered another huge event in my life in my early 30s. I saw my life crashing. Business that I had went down under. The living girlfriend became an ex. She had a different destiny to fulfill, and I wished her well. Somehow, because of the writing I had written when I was about 11 years old, I understood that my life was about to move on to the next stage, and I needed to be alone and get sort of like a clean slate to start life. I remember that with all the furnitures and everything on the truck downstairs, I sat in the middle of the living room, an empty living room, with my notepad to see where my writing would guide me. And among the things that I wrote, one of them was, hold out for love, not lost. And I have done that. Be careful of who I surround myself with. Very important. People carrying all this trauma, what I call rocks on a backpack, and carrying that, it slows you down on your timeline. It slows you to a degree that it actually harms you in your life. So I pretty much cut out just about anybody I knew. We're not enemies. If I see you, I say hello, but other than that, not really. I needed to heal myself, really heal myself. Of the different things that I wrote that day, the one that probably helped me the most was a phrase which says, the only way to overcome pain is to be overwhelmed by care. And the only way to overcome hatred is to bring one's life with so much love so that we can share. And I like that very much. So I embraced that. And I just started adding love on my inside, caring for people. It was just like a loop. I would care for people. I would be kind to people. Everybody, anybody I knew, anybody I met. And as I care more for people, I felt more love on the inside. And the more love I felt, then the more I care for people. It was a fantastic feeling. And all along, there they were, the two Spanish networks, zero blacks. Once in a while, someone would appear here and there, but nothing permanent. Um, they would have entertaining shows, and they would definitely, speak about Afro Latinos that were in the arts. Too many. Zoe Saldaña, Juno Diaz. We also have Rupert Vanderpoor, Gina Torres, Las Alonso. In 2004, Telemundo actually hired an Afro Latina for their news, Miss Patsy Arias. Although it was locally, only in New York, it felt good. And I thought, okay, changes are coming. So when Comcast actually took over, all of a sudden she disappeared. The status quo was just fine. No blacks allowed. And then came a huge moment when a gentleman by the name of Rodney Figueroa, who was an on-air personality at Univision, actually, while on the air live, he compared the First Lady, Michelle Obama, while Barack Obama was president. He actually compared her to one of the cast members on Planet of the Apes. He said that live on camera. To me, it wasn't a shock. I mean, I had been called a monkey when I was a kid, all the way up to my uh, late 20s, early 30s. Somebody actually said that in my face from the Spanish community. So it wasn't a shock. What was really surprising is the fact that he said this while on the air. That took me by surprise, and I thought, if he felt so comfortable to say such a horrific thing while on the air, I don't even want to imagine what it's like behind the camera, what the culture is like. Now, to the credit of the CEO for Univision, he actually fired the gentleman and brought in an Afro Latina executive and positioned her in a very high uh, place within the company so that she had the power of decision to make some serious move. And some have been made. They have a Afro Latina lady co-anchoring their national news. They also brought in an Afro Latina lady in the morning, national, and a gentleman that they had, the only Afro Latino they have, was doing some reporting once in a while for entertainment. He's now an anchor for a show, and he's more permanent, and he can be seen. So I give the CEO of Univision a lot of credit for what he did, taking charge of the situation and moving forward. Now, Telemundo actually did the opposite. They doubled down on their no blacks allowed culture. I saw a couple of ladies being let go and some new talent being brought on to Telemundo, and green eyes, blue eyes, and I mean they just doubled down. And remember that gentleman that actually made that horrific comment about First Lady Michelle Obama? Well, Telemundo hired him, and that's when I stopped watching Telemundo completely. Just too negative of an energy for me to even bother being part of that. As I continue walking the timeline of my life and getting healthier inside, from time to time I would think how ironic that Afro-Latinos have been such an intricate part of the Latin American culture, yet we are not represented on telenovelas, networks such as Telemundo. I mean, we've been here adding to the human experience for a long time. Perfect example, the king himself, El Señor Ralph Mercado. He was kind of like the Barry Gordy for us. This man brought so much joy with parties and so many different artists that went through his record label that the impact cannot really be measured. Just too many artists. I'm just going to mention one name, the queen herself, Celia Cruz. Azúcar! That's what she used to say. So I can go from the king to the genius, this young man named Gabriel Cepeda. Great parents, college sweetheart, married after graduating and started their family, and there came little Gabriel, later on his sister Mia. And Gabriel, even as a kid, he was very protective, very cautious. You knew he had incredible brain working inside. And all this curiosity and this incredible need for knowledge was nurtured properly by great parents. So now he turns into a 20-some-year-old kid with brilliant ideas. One of them is a startup company that is so explosive that it made it to the New York Times, among other news organizations. Really smart guy, now working behind the scene to turn his idea into something amazing. Now, when it comes to politics, we can go from Ruben Diaz Sr. and his heart to his son, who have represented all of us respectfully and proudly. So this incredibly energetic young lady named Pierina Sanchez, who's on her way to becoming a member of the City Council for the 14th District here in New York City. She's not only a graduate of Princeton University, but also Harvard. And she's coming in with this planet, I'm coming for you attitude. And more important than anything else, seems to be someone really in peace with who she is and honoring her ancestry. And this gentleman, newly elected to Congress, El Señor Richie Torres. Now, this is someone I've been watching for a while. He's very serene in his demeanor, very quiet. And whenever there's something for him to say, he says it in such an eloquent way that I can't help but imagine the greatness inside of his mind. I mean, this guy is so dignified that even while getting arrested, for fighting for whatever he believes in, he looks like dignified. He looks like this. How can someone look like that being arrested? I remember one time I was arrested for driving with a suspended license years and years ago. And just the sound of the handcuff, I exploded in tears. The most undignified moment of my life. I think even the cop felt sorry for me. So how can this Mr. Torres clearly has all the traits of greatness. Although members of the Latino community who are not Afro-Latino, they may not even be aware that this is all happening. They watch telenovela and they see someone that sort of looks like them, or they watch their networks in Spanish and they see someone that looks like them. So for them, they don't even, somehow it doesn't come to their consciousness the level of discrimination that exists. But for us, like, Afro-Latino, yeah, we've talked about it for a very long time. Years ago, I created a community on Facebook called Nosotros Sí Existimos, which means we do exist. And I'm not the only one. You have other members of the community who've been talking about it, yet the power that be within the community just pretends that see no evil, hear no evil, talk no evil. Just and everything, the status quo, continue on. So imagine, Mr. Roberts, what it must have been like for any member of the Afro-Latino community when we knew that Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda was making a great movie about our neighborhood, where I've lived for so many years, Washington Heights, and probably half or even more of the residents look like me. And yet, when the movie comes out, there we are again, being marginalized, put to the side, back of the bus. And the stars, none of them look like us. And for someone like me, not only to find out that this is happening again, but that the people behind the movie had spent probably millions of dollars on Telemundo marketing the movie. So a movie where we are being marginalized, even about a movie about us in our neighborhood, and spending money on a television network that completely ignores our existence. It becomes a bit too much. I mean, this is not in the year 1950. Even on the American culture, in 1954, I believe, Nat King Cole had a TV show in 1954. Yet, on the Latin American culture, we can't even get becomes a bit much. Now, I hold nothing negative about Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda. I think he's fantastic, and anything that comes from him comes from a place of love. And clearly he was not aware that this was happening. Had he known, he would have probably casted a whole, leading cast Afro-Latinos just to spice things up. That seems to be the way he is. I mean, look at Hamilton. He didn't know. And I certainly hold nothing negative towards the personalities at Telemundo. Have they benefited from white privilege, as they call it? Of course. If the network requires physical appearance to be that of Europeans, in order to be in certain positions in front of the camera, then yes, they benefited from that. But that doesn't take away the fact that individually, I'm sure each one of them have worked very hard to get to where they are. And they're just following their dreams. Look, the way I figure, everybody is trying to figure things out. Everybody's trying to come up with ways how to make it through life, regardless of color or social status. From the most famous celebrity to someone that hardly anybody even knows. From the homeless person to the wealthiest, the most elite people on the planet. Case in point, someone who's probably at the very top of the food chain had a great conversation. By the way, you probably know him. I'm sure you do. About 4 or 5 years ago, I had a great conversation with him. His friends call him Nati, right? Yes. And an excessively smart man, which makes him a very humble man with an incredible sense of humor. And during the conversation, it turned kind of sad because we both talked about losing a child, the loss of a son. He lost his son, I lost mine, and how no matter how old we get, we always wonder, what would my kid be had he lived? Now, his son, clearly the top of the food chain, and he committed involuntary suicide with a drug overdose, seeking the next high, or as they say, trying to get back to the cradle. So it really doesn't matter how wealthy or poor you are, how famous or known. Everyone is trying to figure out how to make it through this wonderful thing called life. Please understand, sir, this is not about me at all. I'm more than fine. I'm great. Remember that whole search I had my whole life looking for peace and inner love? Well, all those acts of kindness that I did along the way, just being positive in people's lives, touching their existence as positively as I could, even when people didn't know that I had done it, whether I affected one person's life or thousands. It felt as if with every act of kindness and care that I offer, somehow one of those rocks that I was carrying on my backpack would just turn into sand, one by one, and eventually they just disintegrated. I don't even have a backpack anymore. Sometimes I feel so overwhelmed with love that I actually hug myself. I really do. I don't care. It's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. And so this is not about me at all. It's simply an act of hope. Hope that by sharing with you, sir, who we are, and not only that we've been here for a very long time, but also adding to the lives of everyone, I hope that I can show you that we have possibly earned the ability to sit in the front of the bus. Now, this is not a protest at all. This is not a demand of any kind. I believe anything that is forced is a violation. So I simply allow things to occur accordingly. At this point in my life, I feel so great because I've been able to understand certain things. You see, for a while now, I've known there's absolutely nothing bad about me. Not the texture of my hair, well, when I had hair, not the color of my skin, this bronze permanent tonality. Oh, no. Nothing wrong with it, just beautiful. There's absolutely nothing ugly about my features. Not the size of my nose, my eyes, my lips, my height, nothing. And the same principle applies to you, sir, and to absolutely every human being on the planet. Speaking singularly, my features are perfectly designed not only to tell the story of my life, but the story of my ancestors. And to me, it's an honor to tell our story to everyone I meet, every day, everywhere. And if they seem rough around the edges, let's just say we've had a rough for the past few hundred years, but still here and evolving into something really wonderful. So it's not about me, sir. It's about some 24-year-old kid who absolutely loves being on television. It's her dream. Went to school, is an absolute natural, has this inquiry mind, this ability to convey information, yet cannot get a chance because of his features, the color of his skin, the texture of his hair, and that person deserves a shot at your network, just like anybody else. It's also about the next generation. Me, I walk my timeline. Senor, I'm getting gray hair on my face. They just showed up. Did not ask for permission or anything. They just, here I am, you're aging. And it's fine. But it's about the next generation. For instance, there's a journalist on CBS News named Adriana Diaz. She's working her way up to top tier of journalists at the network. And not too long ago, she married this African-American gentleman. She's pregnant, about to have a beautiful child. That child, whether she is on the American side of the house, or if she's visiting, grandma, la abuela, who's watching telenovela and watching the news, that child deserves to see herself represented on both sides of the spectrum. That child needs to know that she belongs. It's about her, not about me at all. Now, given your record on diversity, your excellent record, I might add, and your Jewish ancestry, no one better than you to understand how racism and discrimination is lethal. It doesn't matter if it's public or if it's silent. It is equally lethal. In its least intense form, discrimination is a killer of dreams. And in its most intense degree, it is a killer of people, of lives, by the masses. So I think I have a good idea what you're about to do. And I want to thank you very much. Before I forget, sir, remember that gentleman that was fired by Univision and hired by Telemundo, Mr. Rodney Figueroa? Please, sir, I'd like to ask you a favor. Do not dismiss him. Do not touch his career. Allow him to remain and to continue his path. You see, I think he has a great story to tell whenever he's ready. And it's going to be very positive for everyone, not only Latin Americans in this country, but all throughout the continent. You see, as it turns out, his father, are you ready for this? His father was Afro-Latino. His mother, light, his father, dark, and there he is. Can you imagine the conversation he must have had with his Afro-Latino members of his family? I wouldn't want to be there. So, please allow me to take this moment to thank you very much, not only for taking the time to watch me my way through this video, but for also doing what I believe you're about to do by correcting this human injustice. And from time to time I have wondered, why I had to endure all those experiences with racism within my own community. And now I get it. Another piece of the puzzle that falls into place. You see, I feel that I was meant to be born on that island, on that family, a mixed family, and to go through those experiences, to feel them, to live through them, so that today I could actually sit here and share my story with you. Now, I have no power, zero. You can call my bank. They will tell you I spend more time in the red zone than anybody else. They're probably trying to come up with a new color just to defund my account. As far as having powerful people to speak to, zero. Nobody calls me. Look, I'm probably the only person on this planet who actually loves telemarketing phone calls. The moment it rings, I get excited. Finally, somebody's calling me. I pick it up and I start talking until they hang up on me. It's a very sad part of my life, but it is. So I have zero power. But you, sir, you are power. And you use it wisely. So thank you very much, sir. And to everyone who actually watched, liked, and shared this video and made this possible, thank you. Eternally grateful. Stay blessed, everyone. And as I say, feed your mind with knowledge and your heart with kindness, and everything will be fine.